For day 3 of Letter Lent, we're continuing to think about Jesus' call to us to follow him. And today's reading is really provocative. Matthew chapter 8, verses 18 to 22. A teacher of the law comes and says, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you will go." Another disciple says to Jesus, "Lord, first let me bury my father." And Jesus responds to both of them, "Foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Follow me, let the dead bury their own dead." I always love verses like this. I was with some friends once, and we were planning a gathering, and we were trying to think of themes, and I was like, why don't we use like the sayings of Jesus? And people were like, yeah. And I was like, how about let the dead bury their own dead? I've come to not bring peace but a sword. Don't throw your pearls before swines. All these just provocative phrases of Jesus that have so much depth and meaning, but are jarring when we read them. Just think of the context of this. Jesus has just done the Sermon on the Mount, which is what we're going through on Sundays. He's shown the heart of the Father. He's taught about this new upside down kingdom. And he's going around. Just before this, he heals many. He heals a man with leprosy. He's healed the centurion's servant. He's going to go on and he's going to calm the storm and heal the demon possessed. It's right within this passage that shows the power, the grace, the goodness of Jesus, something of this new gospel as he's just brought this incredible teaching. And they come to him and say, "Let me follow you." And Jesus says, "You can't depend on anything else if you want to follow me. You can't depend on clothing and housing and finance. You can't depend on family and tradition and status. You must leave it all to follow me." And Jesus doesn't just say, "You must depend on me alone." He makes clear, if you follow me, I am dependent. Jesus is dependent on the generosity and hospitality of others. He doesn't have a shelter to hide in. He doesn't have a family that he's kind of bound to in the same way. His family follow him, some of his brothers are his disciples. Mary is there at the cross, and yet Jesus also turns away from everything that his society and his tradition told him he had to do with his family. Jesus clearly loves family and would bless relationships. Jesus clearly, he tells us not to worry and that God will care for us. But there's a real provocation there. Do we fully depend on him? And also, could he depend on us? Luke tells us that Jesus' ministry was financed by some of his female disciples who were around him, some of the women who loved and served and followed Jesus, that they were his patrons. What a picture that is. That Jesus, in pursuing the kingdom, relied upon the generosity of others. Are we happy to be dependent on God, but dependent on one another? We have a regular men's gathering at 9 o'clock on a Thursday morning. And yesterday we were reading through in Acts about them sharing possessions, and we were saying the two biggest barriers to us meeting need in our church are those who are rich, who aren't generous enough. And that's each one of us. Sometimes we can act as if we've maybe paid our 10% tithe, if that's the tradition we grew up in, or we've given our duty, and we don't give lavishly, sacrificially beyond that. Or it takes someone asking for a need for us to give to that. But the other barrier is us not asking when we need help. We all need help sometimes, and yet it feels like there's so much shame and guilt bound up in asking. That Jesus would call us to dependence on God that leads us to sacrificial generosity and following him. And he would call us to dependence on others that would allow us to move past our shame into true community. What are you dependent on? As you read this passage, maybe you could ask and answer that question today.